Okay, this video is to highlight a rabbit hole I went down, which was about glass shatter effects. So you think like, oh, you just walk up and add a decal, just like any other bullet hit effect in the world, which you kind of can do, right? So if we jump over to our project, we're like, okay, cool. So I got let's grab our decal here. And let's put it on the glass. Wait, why isn't it, is it overlapping correct? Yeah, it is. So what's going on? Why doesn't this show up correctly? And the reason behind this is it works in this project, but it doesn't work in this project, which is the default settings, because this actually only works with forward rendering, which is under your project settings, rendering right here. If you scroll down a little bit, forward rendering right there. And this will recompile your shaders if you click it, by the way, so be careful, your projects have to restart and it takes a while. So under forward rendering, which is used in like a lot of VR games, things like that, this is not a bad way to add shatter effects to glass. You just add in decals like every other hit effect. Works on transparent stuff, works on mirrors, and it's pretty straightforward. However, and let me just quickly overview, this is just pretty normal line trace. Here I spawn in the decal, give it a random rotation, kind of adjust the size a little bit randomly, and then also play a sound when we hit. And this is a pretty standard just decal. It's a deferred decal right here, translucent, and this is the glass shader. Very basic. Okay, but let's jump to this project. If we don't want to use deferred rendering though, because typically there's a reason, or forward rendering, since Unreal's set to deferred rendering for a reason, since it handles multiple lights better, which, like if you're making a cyberpunk world or something like that, or a sci-fi ship, you might not be able to use forward shading. So what are you supposed to do? Well, I have this system here, which you can shoot holes. Granted, this system has a little bit of limitations. For this one, it's only 3 holes, and then the system shatters. It does shatter a little bit to the side. A disclaimer, this is not going to be, it's actually pretty satisfying, but this is not going to be like a physics or procedural fracturing tutorial. That's not what we're getting in. If you want that, I have links some in the description. But we're not going to be doing that. We are going to be going over this and how we approach this and how this works and different variations on this. There is a kind of someone who uses, I think, a similar strategy to what I'm doing here. I didn't look into it too closely, but it's a more shader driven destruction system versus like a physics driven destruction system. And they use what is it, runtime textures, I think, render targets, to achieve a similar effect. And for them, that means they don't have to have a set number of crack points. They can keep chipping away at their stuff as needed. Okay, let me actually pull up the first person. I have a little debug wall back here that I set up when working on this. Let's see here. Yeah, there you go. You can move the little crack points around. But so left mouse button, we're just line tracing. So this would be your gun in your project. So see, we just have a line trace right there, and it's getting fed into the material. and then that is knowing where to put the hole. So this is normal. We're grabbing this. You should probably, I have my things tagged. So if you scroll under tags here, under the component tags, I have everything tagged as window that I want to be shatterable. This system also works with like weirdly shaped glass. That being said, it won't shatter correctly. It actually lags my computer a bit since it's a weird shape. But so you probably want to use the physics materials, which are right here. I actually have a video on that utilizes physics materials for changing colors of things. And that's what you're going to want. Physics, I think at the very bottom. Yep, all these surface types. So you probably want to make one for glass, and you can actually figure out the physics mat. You just insert it right here. Surface profile is where you'll put the physics mat. I didn't do that since I was just trying to figure out how to approach this. But yeah. There's a few assets this use. So I have some cracks which are masked. So there's kind of the actual crack bit, which is the red. There's the center bit, which is going to be the hole. And then there's, which is green. And then this blue is just kind of an additional bubble that I kind of threw in there just because there was a blue channel. But it actually adds a pretty nice effect. I kind of like it. I have it set so you can turn it off. So like this one doesn't have that as strongly, but this one does. And then I also added in like a safety glass where, again, you can turn it off. But adds a nice effect like that. And then I have it so you can make the hole like empty, or you can make the hole whatever color. So this is like a black hole right there. So you have some variety on how do you want to approach that. So let me pull up one of the shader instances. So there's a bunch of stuff that gets set in code here. And then there's also a bunch of settings. So these are the settings. You want the bulge, you want the safety glass, the crack texture. Then this is the safety glass texture. These I've thrown on into Discord in case you're interested in them. This particle effect comes from, I modified a glass texture. This texture though comes from a particle pack that I'll link in the description. It actually is supposed to be ice, I think. Yeah. Or I guess it was glass initially, but they used it for ice, and then I'm using it for glass again. And this, I just kind of set the velocity on the final impact phase down here when it gets shattered, and then I play the sound, spawn the particle, and then add in, I do a little bit of calculation on the box size and set this box location, box size right here, which is a user parameter, box size, velocity, which I add in velocity at point, and then also velocity here, which gets fed into the particle. Right now I'm messing around with using a bit of forward vector, but you can probably calculate this velocity in a better way. I kind of don't actually like how this looks. I think there's a better way to do this. It's it kind of gets the effect that it works, but it doesn't look good. So yeah, these are all the things set on the particles, and then the shard count, I'm just kind of multiplying how big is the window and then adding a bit more shards based on the size of the window, and then I destroy the window. In terms of the meat and potatoes of things though, so we have the crack size. These are all the settings I was talking about. You can change the glass color and the crack color and the color of the hole. All the things are, the alpha is controlled by the opacity. The particle here we go, you feed in the color a little bit. So notice if I shatter a red window, the particles are also red. So that gets fed in through the blueprint. Right here, color, set parameter of this particle. But the set glass impact is where most things actually happen. I'm gonna actually, just so you can kind of see the flow of this a bit better, I'm going to delete this and I'm just gonna map this down here. So what I'm doing is after we know it's a window and it's tagged correctly, we are adding the components into this isn't a list, it's actually a map. So I have the primitives and then the materials, and it asks like, hey, is this primitive already in my list? If it's not, go ahead and put it in the list. And if it is, go ahead and start to crack things, right? And it adds it to the list, gets the materials, it creates a dynamic material instance, and there you go. Once it's here, it's like I check again, hey, make sure, is this thing on the list? Once it is, go ahead and find it on the list. I guess technically I could probably route this straight in here. But I just check again. And then what I did here is I actually added this. Notice this isn't actually in it's not in the functions here. I put it in a function library because I wanted to have access to this function. So for example, in the debug wall here, I'm calling the same function, but this isn't in the flare. But I kind of want it to work that way because the same thing is happening. But I can explain this function. This function, I am feeding in the vector, like, hey, where did I hit the wall? I'm feeding in the material instance, and then I'm setting a bunch of values. So I'm setting the location, I'm setting the rotation, and I'm setting the size to what I want. And I'm giving those random variations, and I'm asking, hey, do you want to vary the size? Do you want to vary the rotation? And then I'm also checking this default is the default value, which is a super big thing. And I just have that quite large because those need default values, and by default they'd be 0, 0, 0, which is at the center of your world. And what that meant is if there was a window at the center of the world, it would have a crack in it. So I just made it a quite large value, so that is less likely to happen. Okay, now we're the shader itself. So here's the glass color. This is pretty normal, and we're basically just blending in a bunch of mask. The complex part is in here. How I made this is a material function. And what I realized is, well, I want this to be world space. So I grab the world space. Not world, aligned. So world aligned texture. So see this node here. I was like, this is quite nice. So I opened this one up. It's like, but there's really some other things I would want to do in here. So I grabbed this in from the library, world align texture, and I copied it and I made my own. And I made some modifications. And I called it shatter point world aligned. And here's what I changed to it. So you have the world position, but I want an offset. I want like to adjust where the center point will be. And I'm going to include a video in the description about UV rotation. That's where I kind of learned this. And I'm adding in this location, which is just a vector. So notice that is here, rotation, no, location 1, which gets set in code. And I am feeding it into this. I'm rotating it. You technically don't need this in terms of the rotation if you just want it to work, but I did make a rotator, which is also in that UV video. Here's my texture object. This is kind of the normal world space stuff here. But this is kind of the difference, is these elements here, is where I'm adding in and doing some math to get the center of the object and setting the pivot point to basically be where whatever this location is. And that's important to get the hole in the glass in the right spot. The sphere mask, you can kind of do automatically and it will show up in the right spot. And that's how things get masked correctly. So particularly for the safety glass. So I think this one has the safety glass, right? Yeah. So this is the sphere mask, and then the center gets reduced with, where is it? Crack reduction. So if you do a power, as long as the sphere mask isn't perfectly hard and it's slightly soft, you can reduce it to make sure the center of it is smaller. And I'm combining all my cracks and mask into these two, which are like named reroute nodes is what you call them. So now that that's named, then I can literally call it later. So that's how you can kind of use those. They're very useful. Make things cleaner. This is the safety glass. This is a normal world aligned texture with the values attached. And I'm just kind of blending. So this is the glass color, and this is a vector 4. Let's keep getting blend. I blend in the cracks. So notice I'm using all the sphere mask, which was this down here. And the safety glass fade, just so I can control it a little bit better. Some crack color. Hey, do you want safety glass? Yes, if you do, blend that in as well using the crack blending. Which would be down here. Yep. I guess, let's see. Yeah, this is the safety glass, this is the bulge, and then this is the actual kind of crack elements of it. And just crack strengths. I do 2 blends. Why do I do 2 blends here? Oh yes, different mask. So this is the red, and this is the green, which is the hole, or this is the crack itself, and just goes into base color and opacity. Very simple. This is kind of the complex part, is what the math you do in here. Once you figure this out, it works. But the actual like feeding in, you just have, this is it. I just have 3 of them, so I can make 3 holes. If you use render targets or something, you probably wouldn't need to do this, but I haven't set this up with render targets yet. And then I blend them all together so they're easy to work with. And then I just feed it into my material. And then that gets set with this, in my material function. So I'm feeding in by name, get the parameter. I'm basically checking like, hey, is this set to the default value, which is the really big value here. And if it is, that means that hole is already placed in the glass, in which case go ahead and return this to be like, hey, it's already set. If not, carry on and set the location of where the crack is supposed to be. And then the other two thing is, hey, do we want to adjust the scale? Which we do. Or this is the rotation. Do we want to adjust the rotation? And then, hey, do we want to adjust the scale? Which we can modify a little bit there. Yep. And we just do it 3 times. We have a play a crack. We're just using the default crack noise that I think they have in engine. And then once it's done it the 3rd time, we do what we explained earlier with the shatter effect. So that's kind of the overview. I kind of want to make a tutorial on this, but it's also halfway done and it got way more complex than I thought it would. I was like, oh, just like impact effects, like that's easy. But it turns out with glass, the system is just different. Can't help myself, I just like cracking these. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask. I more just wanted to share my general approach to this, since there is a limitation of information on this. I've tried to post as many of the useful links as possible about glass cracking in the description that I came across while researching for this. If you find any other useful links, feel free to post them on the Discord. I recently added some new channels to make things a bit cleaner, so people can post development updates and discuss the videos and the different topics we're going over. Unless there's any problems, feel free to post them either in the comment of this video or on the Discord. Catch you later.